People's Temple, the Jonestown Tragedy. We start in the United States. A man named Jim Jones founded the People's Temple. At first, they looked like a community that cared about social justice, until they eventually moved to the jungles of Guyana to build Jonestown. But the promised paradise turned into a prison. In 1978, feeling cornered by a government investigation, Jones ordered his followers to commit revolutionary suicide. More than 900 people died after being forced to drink juice laced with cyanide. Truly one of the most horrifying tragedies of the 20th century. Aum Shinrikyo. Moving over to Japan, we have Shoko Asahara and the Aum Shinrikyo cult. This group was unique but dangerous because they blended spiritual teachings with an obsession with chemical weapons. The peak happened in 1995 when they released sarin nerve gas in the Tokyo subway during rush hour. The result, 13 people killed and thousands injured. Asahara was eventually executed, but the trauma left behind still haunts the people of Japan to this day. Heaven's Gate. Ever heard of people wanting to go home to outer space? In California, Marshall Applewhite led the Heaven's Gate cult. They believed human bodies were just temporary vehicles. When the Hale-Bopp comet passed by in 1997, they were convinced a UFO was trailing the comet to pick them up. In the end, 39 members were found dead wearing neat uniforms and matching Nike shoes. They believed this was the only way to ascend to the next level. Branch Davidians. Back to America. This time about David Koresh and his group in Waco, Texas. Koresh claimed to be the final messiah. Conflict erupted when the FBI besieged their compound over suspicions of illegal weapons stockpiling. The siege lasted for 51 days and ended tragically in a massive fire that killed 76 people, including children. To this day, the Waco incident remains a heated debate over who actually started the fire. Order of the Solar Temple: in Canada and Switzerland, there was a group called the Order of the Solar Temple. They were obsessed with Knights Templar lore and believed death was a transition to the star Sirius. Between 1994 and 1997, a series of highly orchestrated murders and mass suicides took place, leaving over 70 victims. They were often found lying in a circle, as if performing a final ritual to reach outer space. Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments in Uganda. A group emerged that was intensely focused on the Ten Commandments. The leaders told followers the world would end when 1999 closed. When the apocalypse didn't happen, followers began to protest. To silence them, the cult leaders locked around 700 people inside a church and burned it down. Initially thought to be a mass suicide, it was later discovered to be a calculated mass murder. NXIVM now. For something more modern, NXIVM, pronounced Nexium, in America initially looked like a self-help organization for elites and celebrities, but behind the scenes, the leader, Keith Raniere, ran a system of sexual slavery. Women were forced into extreme diets, branded with hot irons, and psychologically manipulated. In 2020, Raniere was finally sentenced to 120 years in prison. Children of God. Founded by David Berg, this international group became notorious for its free love doctrine. Sadly, this was used to legalize extreme sexual exploitation, even involving minors. They used psychological manipulation to make followers feel that what they were doing was a form of God's love. Many victims only found the courage to speak out after the cult began to fade. Extreme Falun Gong faction. Falun Gong is generally a spiritual and meditation practice from China. However, some internal factions are extremely radical. They forbid followers from taking medicine or going to the hospital when sick, believing that illness is karma that must be cleansed through meditation alone. As a result, many followers have died from diseases that were actually medically treatable. Anthill Kids. Finally, perhaps the most physically sadistic of all, the Anthill Kids in Canada, led by Rock Therio. He maintained absolute control through fear. Therio often performed surgeries without anesthesia on his own members and engaged in severe torture and mutilation as forms of punishment. He was eventually arrested and died in prison, leaving behind a real-life horror story of how insane one person's control over others can be.